Hey up. Right, I feel like I've made this video several times over the last 3 years. Well, I think actually definitely I have. If you're a regular follower of this channel that's been following it for, the last 2, 3, 4 years or whatever, you'll realise that, the shift in content on this channel regarding Royal Enfield isn't a sudden one. There's no mystery to it. There's been a step-by-step weekly transition from Royal Enfield content over the last 3 years, which has been a completely open process, documented in my videos week in and week out. Yet once again, over the last week or so, I've been inundated in the comments with accusations that I've made a sudden U-turn on my opinion of Royal Enfield. Sort of only yesterday I was extolling the virtues of the Interceptor 650 and saying how wonderful it was, and now today all I'm doing is hating on the brand. It's not hate, it's just being critical. That's my job. Now, the reality of the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650 is that I actually sold it over 2 years ago. There's been no content on that bike in this channel for over 2 years. And I think there's two things that come into play here. You've got a group of people who have subscribed recently on the back of old content that's been there for years. They've not necessarily paid attention to how old that content is. And then, of course, the next time they look, the content is quite different. So to them, it's a sudden shock. And then there's the other type of people who are only interested in Royal Enfield content. They joined the channel 2, 3, 4 years ago. They subscribed. Whenever the notifications come up in their feed for a new video that I've released, it doesn't contain the word Royal Enfield, so they don't click on it. And I'll get on to why that is a problem later on. Now, the problem for these people is that, their own psychology, their own brains have played a trick on them. The last time they watched this channel, I was covering Royal Enfield, which was probably 2, maybe even 3 years ago. They click on a recent video that mentions Royal Enfield, and the brain glues together the last video that they watched 2 or 3 years ago, attaches it to the video that they're watching now, and to them it seems like a sudden U-turn, and that's not the case. What they've missed is 2 or 3 years, a potential 200 or 300 videos that they haven't watched that's chronicled the transition. And it's obvious to me what's happened, because they'll rant and rave how, they've been subscribed for years, they're an avid follower of this channel, they've watched all my videos, and, they can't understand why I've suddenly made this U-turn. So, of course, the only thing I can sort of take from that is, obviously, you're not an avid viewer, you haven't watched my videos for a long time, because if you had, you would know what's happened, and obviously you have missed a lot of videos. And that psychological time warp makes those returning viewers exceptionally vulnerable to a classic logical trick, the straw man fallacy. In logic, these people have seen the change. They can't argue with the context and the logic because it's solid. So what they do is they strip away the actual context and replace it with a new context which is born purely from their imagination. They exaggerate it into an extreme caricature of what they've seen, and then they attack that caricature because it's easy to defeat. So I get all the accusations that Royal Enfield stopped paying me to make reviews, so I've thrown all my toys out of the pram, or Royal Enfield refused to give me a free bike, so I've turned against them. Or there's the classic one that Royal Enfield took me under their wing when I was a small channel and they built this channel for me, I owe it all to them. Well, that's not true. I was a well-established channel when Royal Enfield approached me. I had 50 or 60,000 subscribers, and that's why they approached me. They still didn't have a particularly good reputation at that time, and they saw an opportunity for a free lunch from my channel, which they got. They benefited from my coverage on a channel that I'd built up through my own hard work and, injections of my own cash. They never paid me. and I always paid for the motorcycles that this channel has presented, apart from the press bikes. The reality is, I paid them. And they threw these imaginary strawman arguments at me because they're unable to argue with, the actual documented facts. Royal Enfield's insistence on platform sharing and badge engineering, high dealership maintenance costs, and of course the rising competitive standards that they're expected to live up to. They can't argue with that, so instead they attack me. And that is classic textbook strawman fallacy. Now, there's a practical side to this that most viewers don't even consider, and that's when subscribers tune out because the channel isn't covering a specific brand anymore. It actually creates a major structural problem for larger channels. In fact, it goes further than that. It creates a major structural problem for YouTube as a platform. Whenever a major channel releases a new video, YouTube has to decide who they're going to offer that video to. So they do tests on subscriptions from that channel. They offer the video to those subscribers, and if those subscribers don't click on it because it's a Honda or a BSA or whatever and not a Royal Enfield, the way the algorithm interprets that is that this video is of no interest to his subscribers. So it effectively buries the video and doesn't offer it in the correct way to a wider motorcycling audience. To try and combat this, what YouTube does every year is it has major culls of inactive accounts. Those accounts are subscribed to various channels. The owners of those accounts don't use the accounts very often, so they just wipe them off the platform, and that clears the algorithm up a little bit and makes video placement a little bit more successful. And I don't know what the threshold is, but we all know this phenomenon where you subscribe to a channel and then suddenly find you're unsubscribed, but you didn't do it. Apparently YouTube has unsubscribed you from a channel. Again, this is YouTube cleaning house, looking through accounts, looking at subscriptions and removing subscriptions when those accounts are not actively using those subscriptions. Now, it's not a foolproof method, but it probably only scratches the very tip of the iceberg, but it's all they can do to try and preserve YouTube as a platform by cutting out whatever deadwood they can find. In the same way, some of the really big channels regularly have to go through forced culls of subscribers. They use various strategic practices to slightly annoy that deadwood subscription base and make them voluntarily unsubscribe, because they can't unsubscribe them. It's up to the actual account holder itself to do that. So when people publicly berate me in the comments and announce that they're unsubscribing, they're not actually slapping me in the face. They're doing the channel a massive favour. They're voluntarily moving off the subscription roster, so there's a better chance of my new uploads getting to general motorcyclists that are happy to just watch any form of motorcycle content rather than something that's very specialised. Now, to understand why this channel was so Royal Enfield rich for 5-6 years, you have to look at what the market was like back then. Everybody else had been ignoring especially the modern classic segment, middleweight motorcycles, 350s and 650s. Royal Enfield had identified that there was a gap there and they moved into it, and kudos for them. They did a brilliant job. But the thing is, they were the only people in that segment. Nobody else was doing it. So I was reviewing those bikes in a void. There was no one else to compare them to. You can only review the motorcycles that exist. You can't review imaginary ones or ones that you think might appear in the future. Although I did say several times, Royal Enfield is killing it in this segment, but I have to wonder whether they will survive if other people move into this niche in the market. They were re-pioneering that segment of motorcycling, and openly praising for them for doing that at the time and extolling their virtues. Wasn't a case of me signing a lifetime contract to being a fan of their brand forever, ignoring their flaws and ignoring any new competition that came along. It was simply a matter of I was reviewing them in a niche void. I don't actually have any loyalty to any motorcycle brand. My loyalty is to the people that watch my videos, in keeping them up to date with what the latest and greatest it is and how the market is changing, to allow them to make decisions on what they want to buy. Now, when Royal Enfield sort of first underwent that rebirth, it was something new and it was something fresh. We had the Interceptor and the Continental GT, but then along came the J Series platform and the later 650 platforms, which leaned really heavily on just simple cosmetic changes of platform sharing, otherwise known as badge engineering. Now, from a manufacturing and commercial standpoint, platform sharing makes complete sense. It minimises tooling costs and maximises profit margins, but from a reviewer's perspective, it creates a very real boundary. Once you've thoroughly tested one of the J Series platforms or one of the latest 650 twin platforms, you've essentially evaluated every cosmetic variant derived from it. You've run out of content. Now, the actual turning point for content on this channel, I think, occurred in either late spring or early summer 2023. As you know, I try to bring on a new project bike for the channel every year. It's what helps to keep content fresh, and it's what's enabled this channel to last for 11 years, which is a long time on YouTube. By that time, I'd owned and comprehensively reviewed and covered the Interceptor 650, the Continental GT 650, the Classic 500, and then the new Classic 350 Reborn. Now, on top of that, I'd comprehensively long-term reviewed all the other 650 and 350 models to date. We knew that there weren't very many more models coming out because of the itinerary that Royal Enfield had given us, and it left me with very little choice for a project bike for that year. I did suggest the Hunter 350. No one seemed to be particularly interested in it. So in 2023, I skipped buying in a project bike, and that, I think, is the one and only time that I did that. There was nothing new coming from Royal Enfield that we knew of that was going to be relevant to the viewers and relevant for me. Would have essentially reached the logical conclusion with Royal Enfield Motorcycles. But then the following year, the entire market landscape changed in that segment of motorcycles. Triumph introduced the 400 models, and along came BSA with the Gold Star 650, and that offered me an opportunity to present something fresh to viewers that they hadn't seen before by bringing on the Gold Star as a new project bike, which is exactly what I did. But something else happened that year as well. Just as new competition was moving into the market, Royal Enfield decided to sever its relationship with MotoGP. Now, I wasn't a great fan of MotoGP, I've got to admit, but this presented them with a huge logistical problem. MotoGP had built up their parts and motorcycle distribution network along with, the warranty claim department over the entire space of a decade. That's not something that you can replicate overnight, and it seemed to me at the time that what Royal Enfield had done is they'd concentrated on the import and distribution of motorcycles, but they're not given the same sort of attention to the warranty and distribution of parts part of that business. In the UK market, they'd underestimated the complexity of what was required to pull that off, and at the same time the speedo failed on my Classic 350 and it was off the road for 3 months. And the complaints started to flood into my comments section on various videos of people that had warranty issues with the bikes and they'd been waiting an eternity for parts to arrive so they could get the bikes back on the road. This became a regular theme in my comments. And don't forget, at that point in time, I'd already had years of viewers complaining in the comments section about the high prices that they were being charged for maintenance of the motorcycles through dealerships. Now, I know a lot of people jump in and say, oh, I found it really cheap and reasonable. Just because you do, it doesn't mean that other people haven't had a problem. Again, presenting something like that as a reason for proving me wrong is straying into strawman fallacy territory. And of course, the elephant in the room is that Royal Enfield had done this just as some major competition had moved into their market. Then, at the beginning of last year, 2025, Honda introduced the GB 350S into the UK and European market. And Royal Enfield severed its contract with Sheldon Blake, the PR company that had been managing its affairs since it came back to the UK back in 2019. Now, going back to when I reviewed the Bear 650 and the Classic 650 early last year, what they'd done is they'd put an interim PR department in place, very inexperienced staff. They didn't know the business, they didn't know who was who regarding press contact, and Royal Enfield had stripped away a huge part of their PR budget when it came to press bikes. Now, put this all together and what it amounted to was a huge corporate misstep by Royal Enfield that semi-crippled the business in the UK, bearing in mind the Bantam 350 had appeared just a few months before that. And there were hemorrhaging sales to the likes of Triumph, BSA, and of course now Honda. Now, this isn't some sort of wild conspiracy theory or straw man fallacy. You don't have to take my word for this. Just look at the MCIA sales data for the last year or so. When Triumph moved into the market, it took away some of the sales from the 350 and the 650 category in Royal Enfield's lineup. And then along came the BSA Bantam 350 and the GB 350 from Honda, who interchangeably take it in turns, topping the sales charts month after month after month. And Royal Enfield have been relegated to 4th place. And that's happened not because of anything that I've said or any other YouTube channel. It's happened because customers have voted with the wallets. They've looked at what's on offer and they've gone for what they consider to be the best bet for them, both lifestyle-wise and as far as the wallets are concerned. For most motorcyclists, brand loyalty is interchangeable. You swap brands on a regular basis every few years based on, the fact that you might have got a bit fed up with the brand that you've been buying for the last 2 or 3 years and something else has caught your eye that's made by someone else. That's natural, that's normal, that's what the market does. Now, I've still got an open line through my press account to Royal Enfield. If I want to contact them, I will contact them and they usually respond. But they've got nothing left for me to review. What you see from me is not hate towards Royal Enfield, it's just a critical appraisal of what is going on. At the end of the day, my job on this channel isn't to protect anyone's feelings or validate a personal purchase decision that you made 3 years ago. My job is to critique and appraise the qualities and the cons, if you like, of the huge pool of motorcycles that are now available in this market. And judge bikes strictly on how they perform today against current competition, which includes cost of ownership and servicing problems. I'm no longer reviewing motorcycles in a void. Just because I said that a bike was brilliant 3 years ago, 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, that doesn't mean that that still holds up to scrutiny now competition has moved in. Royal Enfield have defaulted to a stance of marketing by nostalgia and lifestyle with a heavy reliance on customer loyalty. A loyalty that, to be honest, is a figment of their imagination. This is exactly what Edward Turner CEO of Triumph BSA did back in 1960, the man who designed the Triumph Speed Twin engine. He returned from a tour of the Japanese motorcycle factories. After inspecting their production lines, he famously dismissed the oncoming threat to the British board and press, stating, "The Japanese are making large numbers of lightweight, small-capacity motorcycles, but they pose no threat to the motorcycle industry here in Britain. They do not know how to build large-capacity machines, nor do they understand what the Western rider wants." And he continued with Triumph BSA on exactly the same trajectory. He relied on nostalgia and brand loyalty, relying on cannibalisation and badge engineering as an excuse for bringing out new models. The British public got fed up and they switched over and moved to Japanese brands. The rest is history. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you'd leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber, as long as you actually watch the videos. I will of course be back on Friday, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.